So first of all, we should talk about the gear. Let's start with the camera itself. Anybody really, whether it's a full frame camera or a cut frame sensor, it doesn't matter. It's the glass that we put in the front is going to be our main thing, to be fair. Now, some of you will want to use a medium zoom lens, and if that's all you've got, well, that's all you've got. But I encourage you to either use a very long lens like the 70-200 lens if you've got the space, or my preferred is an 85mm prime. The 85mm prime reacts in a different way compared to a zoom lens when we're working at the likes of f8. So a medium zoom lens, even at this case it's a 24-105 lens, even at the f8 will actually give an exaggerated depth of field, whereas a prime lens will give us pretty much the exact depth of field that we need to make sure we've got focus depth from the nose to the back of the head, which is absolutely key, of course. We're also going to be talking about the creativity use of the lens. So we'll be using the likes of the prime at f4. And the reason to do that, I need to keep the sharpness from the nose to the ear, but we'll talk about that later on. So for me, my preferred lens is going to be a prime 85mm or a 100mm macro. The secondary lens would be a 70-200 lens, but obviously that's pretty much reliant on enough space. But I don't want to use this around about the 70mm. I want to use it at like the 100-200 range and as close to that 200 as I can physically get to. My last resort would be the likes of the 24-105. The 24-105 will always sit in the bag anyway. It's a perfect commercial lens, especially if all of a sudden they throw groups on us instead of individuals as well. So it'll allow me to actually move from basically the prime at 85 for the headshots straight with one lens choice into actually setting things up for a group. So if all you've got is a 24-105, brilliant, it's no problem, don't worry about it. Your next investment is going to be a £300, £400 kind of 85mm prime. You don't need to spend the big money yet. The only thing I will say is that if you're using the likes of the 24-70 lenses, they're really not good for the kind of the headshot photography. There's too much distortion of the face, and there's not enough depth of field as far as the exaggerated portrait lens, the 85-100, for us to actually get away with a great portrait image, as well as controlling that depth of field, as I was saying. Trigger. I definitely want to use a trigger so I can send the message from the hot shoe itself straight out to the flashes to fire now. It also allows me to quickly change any power settings on the flashes or tell a certain flash not to fire as well. So a good quality trigger. I use the Elinchrom EL Skyport. That is linked into all my Elinchrom flashes here. Then I can control them through their different groups and so on. Memory, as far as the card is concerned, I want to keep at least double the amount, but because I'm going to be tethering straight into the laptop, which I feel is an essential part of headshot photography, by the way, it means that all my information is going straight to the laptop itself. I use Tether Tools. You can usually tell it because of the orange cable, and that basically just fits into the side of the camera itself. But one of the most important parts is this little kind of connector here, which is the jerk stopper, minimizing any damage to the camera should you tread on the cable, pull the cable, or whatever it is. You know, a USB on the camera is around about £230 to get replaced, where a cable is about 25 quid. So big investment to save a lot of money, I'm sure, with it. As far as your laptop, it doesn't matter if it's a Mac or a PC. I'm running Capture One. It's absolutely built for commercial photography. And if you're shooting a lot of headshot photography, I'd say invest into it without any trouble, because it's a complete workflow on there, as well as just actually capturing into it. Once I've captured and I've done the job, the client's going to actually choose the best photographs pretty much on the day. And then from there, we'll kind of copy all the files across onto a secondary drive, but it allows me to actually kind of pretty much finish the images on the day of the job without any retouching being done. That's a whole different discussion. Touched on the lighting. I want to use soft boxes for the main light onto the headshot to do with the key styles. That's going to be everything from high key, mid key and low key, even a little bit of the fashion kind of level. I prefer the deep octa when working on location. It's great, it sits above camera position, pretty much actually flat on, or it can just quickly move off towards the side. Deep octa is in its name. You can see that it's kind of good in depth. It has a beautiful quality of light, has 2 layers of diffusion inside, as well as the outside screen as well. Then we've got the bigger softbox. This will give us more of a daylight quality. What I mean by that, it allows the light to kind of scatter around more. So if I'm looking for more of a classic style of photography, I'll often work with the softbox itself, the bigger one, instead of the deep octa. Why? Because I just want that light to feather and wrap around the subject to avoid me having to actually use any fill within the scene itself. We've got strip boxes, and strip boxes for me are a great way to control small sections of light. This allows basically when I'm using it for hair light and separation light, it's perfect because it's just going to hit onto the sides. Everything needs to be controlled, of course, and we'll talk about that when we get to the styles. Then we talk about the backgrounds. In studio, I want a light grey, a medium grey, and basically a colour. And the colour will be decided by the client in advance if it's a part of the session. I've also got the likes of a pop-up black background here or black paper, whichever you prefer. I'll either use a white wall, or in this case today we've got the Last Light by Manfrotto highlight in the background. So that can either work as my white background, my grey background as well when it's switched off, of course, but it just gives me that variety of backgrounds that I can use in a very small space, or in studio space I'm ready for actually anything that the client wants. Reflectors are another thing that we're going to use quite a lot because often we want to just lift the light below the subject themselves, especially when we're using a kind of a clamshell technique. So in other words, the light is above camera pointing directly to the subject. We're going to use the reflector below to bounce the light back up again to actually give us that look. So whether we're using the likes of the triflector or we're using the tri-grip, which is the reflector by Last Light by Manfrotto again, it depends on what we're using, styling or portability as well. I'd often encourage you as well to use a grey card, shoot the grey card at the beginning of each shoot, then you basically custom balance on camera straight away, and then you know pretty much you've got a grey card for any colour reference in future, plus the colour is set on camera straight away, so you don't need to actually worry about kind of colour balancing in the post-production because it's done at source. Last but no means least, it's a tripod. If I'm working on location, or a studio stand, like we're seeing here, if we're working in studio itself. Why do we use a tripod or studio stand? It's just so we can keep a consistency of the shot. It's not like portrait photography where we're moving around and trying to be Austin Powers as photographers. It's about getting that crisp image. So you're concentrating on the expression and you want to actually work in with your eyes to the client's eyes to make sure you're really pulling that expression out. So studio stand in studio, of course, too heavy to move around on location. Portable tripod to work with if I'm working on location, just to keep the consistency of the shot, as I said, to concentrate on the actual expression itself.